Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagglehos. And in this video, I am very excited because I have what I feel like is a very kind of exciting and special video to show you guys here today because I've been wasting a lot of my free time working on what you guys see in front of you on the screen, and that is the Silver Age comic book index. That is right. This was actually an idea that I got inspired by over at another YouTube channel called Bench Clear Media. Now, if you guys don't know Bench Clear Media, they specialize in the sports card hobby. But some of the guys on that channel who, I tend to watch some of the other hobby markets from time to time just to keep tabs on what's going on with everybody. And they had actually made a vintage card index in order to track values for vintage sports cards. And I thought that that was so cool with how they made that I felt like we should definitely make one for comic books as well. So shout out to Bench Clear Media for coming up with this idea. And basically, I'm excited to now showcase the results I have for you guys, which is, of course, a Silver Age comic book index. But before I get into the video and show you guys all the results and talk about what I found in the data here, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, that would be great. Obviously, I'm not in my comic book room right now. I am on the road for work right now, so don't mind the webcam settings that I have going on because we got some really, really good juicy data to talk about here today. But like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us get into this video here. So let's talk about this index. What is the Silver Age index? Well, of course, if you guys, are familiar with, investing in stocks and things like that, you have things like the S&P 500, you have various ETFs, maybe you have like a VTI or VEO, all those Vanguard index funds. And basically what these stocks and these index funds are a amalgamation of a bunch of different companies, all put into one portfolio that people can invest in. And typically what people will always encourage you guys to do is, if you're investing in the stock market, it's just better to put all of your money in an S&P 500 or an ETF or whatever the case may be, because you just want to know that the overall market is going up and you don't want to predict any one particular stock. Well, I thought it would be kind of cool to basically build out a portfolio of comic books as a Silver Age index. Now, let me get a couple things clear. This is not a perfect science. This is one person, me, doing all of this legwork, putting in all of these data entry points and things like that. So, take this all with a grain of salt. And there's lots of room for variables here. There's lots of room for error. But I just thought this would be kind of cool to give us a general feel and a general sense of the market. And, maybe we can have some conclusions about it overall. But let's kind of go over how I came across all of these, points of data and how I, kind of created this index before I actually show you guys sort of the results for it. And, definitely my goal is, after I kind of flush this one out right here, I definitely want to make one for the Bronze Age. I definitely want to make one for Copper and Modern as well. And then we can kind of use these charts to show against each other and kind of figure out, some things about the market that maybe we didn't know before. We can definitely check out volatility, which we'll get into a lot in this video. But basically, I took a page out of the Bench Clear Media book with how they constructed their Silver Age index. Now, they might have had a little bit of a different approach, but basically here is what I did for mine. So I took the top 100 sold Silver Age books, which this of course comes from what Go Collect is suggesting as the top 100 Silver Age. I'll show you guys what that means in a second. Don't worry, I'm not using their actual data. I'm just using the comic books that they suggest. Now, there is also curation in that. I took the top 100 sold Silver Age comic books, and then I also made sure to incorporate some of the other Silver Age books that felt like weren't included in that, but I felt like these were, key staple books of the Silver Age that probably need to be included regardless. Then I took the grade level, one series of grade level amongst that book, and I basically picked which grade level has sold the most in terms of volume of sales. I took that grade level and I used that to chart the data. And then I took the final sale of each month, which we've identified as the market close for that particular book's value. And then I entered it using all of GPA data. Then I aggregated all of that, and then I took sort of the monthly trends of what happens in those particular volume of sales in that particular month and that particular year. So I know that that was like a word salad of things, but let me show you guys, specifically how I kind of came across this, and then we'll get into the good stuff in just a second here. So again, if you go over to Go Collect, you can sort by market overview. And what you can see right here, if I go to hottest comics, I go to Silver Age, I sort by the past 365 days. So this is the past calendar year. I go by 20 per page, and I can scroll down here and I can see what Go Collect suggests as these are the highest volume of sales for particular Silver Age comic books. You can obviously do Bronze Age and Copper Age as well. So you just scroll down right here. Basically, Go Collect is saying of all of the comic books in the Silver Age, Fantastic Four 48 has sold the most in terms of volume over this last calendar year. Just scrolling down here. So you have FF 48, ASM 50, Iron Man #1, FF 52, Silver Surfer 1, FF 67, FF 49, Submariner 1, Avenger 57, etc., etc., etc. And I basically went down here and I just added in every single line item for every single book all the way up to the top 100. And then I also went back and saw like, hey, like this particular book is not included. I think it should be in this index fund. So even though I'm calling it the, the Silver Age Index 100, it's actually 110 comic books overall. So you guys will eventually see that as well. Then, what I basically did is manually went over to GPA. I said, okay, so let's start with Fantastic Four 48. We go over to FF 48. We pull it up right here. I go down here and I say, okay, what grade level has the most data points? Like what has sold the most? And if you go down here, you can see the 4.5 happens to have the most sales. If I open this up right here, I basically went in and kind of counted. I'm like, okay, what generally has the most sales over these particular years or so? And in this particular case, the 4.5 grade of FF48 does have that. Then I would go into 2019, for instance, I would go down here to January and I would say, okay, what is the market close for January for this book? Okay, it's $875. That becomes my first data point. What is February close? Okay, it's $850. Okay, that's my next data point. What is March close? It is $1,100, and so on and so forth. And I basically did this for every single book for every single year up through 2018. And then, I ended up with something of an Excel sheet that looks like this. Lots of numbers all across the years, lots of different books all across the Silver Age right here. And that's essentially how I constructed this sort of Silver Age index. I added it all together and then we basically charted it from there. So that's kind of what it is. Again, it's not a perfect science. I used my discretion and curation. Sometimes you'd have like anomaly numbers. I would push those to the side if I felt like they were, not really following any sort of logic. Sometimes I might figure out some median values and things like that. So again, there's a lot of room for error in this, but overall, it gives us a general sense of the market and how it has been doing, say, month over month and year over year. So with all that preamble out of the way, let's kind of get into the first graph here. And this one I think is really interesting because this one I'm going to say is the Silver Age 110 index. This is me taking what I felt like were the top 110 Silver Age books out there in the market, and I basically charted the value across every month over the course of the last 4 years or so, starting in January of 2018 right here. And here is the graph that you see for the Silver Age. Just to make it clear, the number that you see on those various points along the graph is the value of money that was spent in that particular month on these 110 books at the various grade levels. So just to give you a sense of like how much liquidity is being put into the market in any given month. And, generally there's a couple takeaways I think you can kind of see right off of the bat for this graph right here. That is, from January 18 through about, early 2021, I would say that the overall trend for the market was moving upward, right? You see more high months than you see low months going over the course of those couple of years. Then we have what we can all identify as sort of that boom of 2021. You can see the numbers really go up in value, in say April of 2021. And then what you see here, which I think is the most interesting thing in 2021 and 2022, is you see what I would say is extreme volatility, like extreme highs, extreme lows. Now there's going to be some massive swings in this, and I'm actually going to show you guys another graph. And one of the reasons why there are such massive swings in this is because this is the Silver Age 110 that do include a bunch of monster grail books. Like we're talking about, this does include AF15, this does include FF1, this does include FF5 and all of those books that we know to be, those monster grails. And if there's a sale in a particular month, well, that month is going to look a lot more swingy than if there's a sale not in that month, because we're talking about, an AF15, which could be a $40,000 swing. So there's a lot of volatility in this graph, but there is especially a lot of volatility in these last couple years or so in the comic book market. So I think that this is one interesting thing to think about, but let's move on now to the next graph. And this is where I think, we really get a sense of the, how the Silver Age is doing overall. If we take away, all of the sales of, let's say, we normalize this, what we see is this is the graph that we get right here. Now, what did I do with this particular graph? I basically took out 10 of the biggest books in the Silver Age, which basically means I took out the AF15, I took out the FF1, I took out the FF5, I took out, Tales of Suspense 39, I took out ASM #1, basically all of those 10 big books that really create those massive swings in terms of the value that you see right here. And what I think is really interesting about this chart right here, when we focus just on those 100 Silver Age books that are not the massive grails, this is where we really start to see a clear picture of the value of the Silver Age index overall. And, starting in January 18, you can see that we were on a really steady decline, really steady increase from 2018 to 2019 to 2020. We saw definitely a little bit of a spike up, some volatility because we're in 2020 and, the state of the COVID market and state of the economy. Then we get to 2021, everything blows up to massive levels where we see peak performance in April of May and May of 2021. And then you can see what I think is really interesting here in 2021 and 2022. Again, we see massive volatility. Like the distance of a high month to a low month is so much bigger, almost 2 times more than the average distance that you would see in a market like 2018 or 19 or even 20 for that matter. I mean, there was some volatility in 20, but definitely it feels like we got a lot more now. And that's one of the really interesting things I think about when I think about, what we can learn about the comic book market is like, if you were someone who was out there buying in, 2018 or 2019, you could feel pretty safely that when you made your purchase, you were, buying within the ballpark of what the book's value really was. Like, maybe next month it would go down a little bit. Maybe next month it would go up a little bit. But generally speaking, no matter what month you were in, it was basically a quote unquote good time to buy because you could feel pretty confident that over the long term, it was slightly going to go up. Now we're in 2021 and 2022 and anywhere, month to month, there's so much volatility. Like you don't know if you're buying the top, you don't know if you're buying the bottom, you have absolutely no idea. And that whole speculative market and that like inconsistency, I think is what makes it really hard for comic book buyers over these last 2 years or so. And this is, just the Silver Age that we're talking about here, which you think would be, fairly consistent overall. One of the other things that, is interesting to point out right here is, of course, you see kind of from May to June, you see a pretty big market. I'm not going to call it a crash, but I'm going to call it a pretty big correction. This is where I thought it was really interesting that, we're taking the top 100 Silver Age sales and we're just looking at the performance of the month of June right here. Granted that the market hasn't necessarily closed, so there could be some correction, but, I'd be willing to bet that, by the end of June, those numbers would roughly be the same. And you could see a very, very steep decline. I've been talking about on the channel, for a little bit here, talking about how prices have been correcting. And I think that this, chart right here is pretty interesting to look at and to kind of tell and paint that picture. So again, one of the interesting things to me, a lot of volatility overall, some capitulation that we've seen here in this last month or so. And I think it'll be really interesting to kind of finish out the rest of this year and see if we can actually get back to a place where the windows to which, the highs and lows that we're getting for the comic book, in terms of like the liquidity coming in month to month, can actually get a little smaller. And I think if they actually get smaller, that's really going to be a great place for all of us as comic book buyers because we're going to be able to feel more confident with our purchases. All right, let me show you guys a couple other graphs that I charted out here just because I had, sort of the data to play with. I wanted to kind of chart, what is the sort of month by month trend over these last 5 years or so. So here you can see right there at the bottom, you see this is January through December. And then, the 5 lines you're seeing are the various years, starting 2018 with the blue line, 2019, the red line, 2020 is the yellow line, 2021 is the green line, and halfway through 2022 is that orange line right here. You can see that, for the most part, with the exception of where we're at with 2021 and 2022, again, every single year, the values of comic books have gone up consistently. And then then 2021, we had this massive, spike up. And then now we're kind of in 2022, Terry. We don't really know what we want to do here. Again, I would say as far as like a month by month, how it's going, it definitely feels like, I don't know if you can draw too many specific conclusions. Although if I was going to invent a narrative, I see a kind of a consistent dip in April, kind of a consistent dip in June, kind of a consistent dip in September, and then another consistent dip in November. And if I was going to invent sort of a narrative around why that maybe happens, I'm actually starting to think that, every year we have in May a summer blockbuster coming out, right? Whether it's going to be Infinity War, Endgame, Doctor Strange, whatever the case may be, we're going to have our tentpole Marvel movie come out. And I feel like maybe May is the height of that. A lot of people spending money in May because of the height of the market there. Maybe a lot of people in March see that trailer. Then in April, everyone's selling off. Then the movie gets us all hyped again. And then we kind of go through these cycles of movie trailers to movies. And that's kind of where the hype kind of is generated. Also, I see a lot of expense in December and not so much necessarily in January. I think that has to do probably with taxes and the calendar year. If you're somebody out there who is a heavy into comic book buying and selling, you probably end up making a lot of purchases in December because you need to write off some of those capital gains. So you're like, oh, I better, pick up some inventory. So I could assume a lot of people make big purchases in December, and then in January, it doesn't really help you to buy necessarily in that calendar year. So I can see January being sort of a down month. So, I don't know if this is very helpful, but it is interesting to sort of look at overall as a graph. Now, a couple other charts right here that I created before we kind of wrap up, because I had a decent amount of data points per series, I thought it'd be kind of cool to chart this right here. But here's Silver Age by series. Again, it only really applies to 4 series overall because the other series were like 2 books or 3 books or 4 books, Tales of Suspense, things like that. So ASM right here, hands down, the #1 bought series in terms of volume of sales. The ASM chart on this is going to be the blue one. There's 33 data points on this one. Red chart is going to be Avengers. There's 10 points right there. Yellow chart is going to be Fantastic Four, which has 15 points of data. And then X-Men is going to be the green one, which has 11 points of data overall. Again, really, really inconsistent, massive swings with this right here. So I don't really know if it's too helpful to look at it. You can definitely see that I would say Fantastic Four, as far as the speculation is concerned, has really picked up in 2021 and 2022. Like that's where you start to see the spread as far as looking at Avengers in 2018 as compared to ASM and Fantastic Four. And then when you go to, September of 2021 and 2022, you can see that the spread has widened so much, because I think that would suggest that a lot of people were like, hey, we're into the Avengers during 2018, we're buying Avengers books. And then, now that we're quote unquote done with the Infinity Saga, we know that, Fantastic Four is next. We know X-Men might be next. So there's a lot more speculation going in on that one in those later months right there. But, if I normalize it once again and I take away basically the big grail books, like let's say, just to get away from some of those swings, we take away ASM #1, we take away FF1, we take away X-Men 1, we take away Avengers 1. What does the chart look like overall? Well, of course, you're going to see more money being spent on ASM because there's just more books being bought. We're talking about 33 books compared to say 10 of that of Avengers. But in terms of the values and where things are fluctuating, I would say that the series have been pretty consistent overall. But now, of course, going back to this last chart, due to the fact that we all know that Doom is coming, we all know Fantastic Four is coming, X-Men is coming. There's a lot more boom and bust month to month. There's a lot more speculation overall. So that's why the numbers are going pretty crazy, in these last couple months or so, compared to if we take away those books, it definitely feels like as series, people, kind of value them generally the same, around the same ballpark. Certainly FF is a little bit ahead. And then ASM, of course, is the, #1 book that everybody wants to buy. It's the one that is bought and sold the most, so therefore it is going to have the most value. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. That was me showing you guys the Silver Age index that I created. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about, some of the charts and the data and the graphs that I showed you guys? I think that this is pretty cool overall. I mean, my goal with this is to keep it going. I definitely want to add more, points, data points over time. I definitely want to build one for the Bronze Age and Copper Age and see what those charts end up looking like. Let me know what you guys think. Again, shout outs to Bench Clear Media. They had the idea for this. They kind of created the construct with how they created their index. I thought it was a really, really effective tool, and it was very, very interesting to see. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and we'll see you in the next video.